بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا وحبيبنا مولانا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وأصحابه وبارك وسلم سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا علما يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك آمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام شيخ.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
I pray that all of you are well, inshallah ta'ala, and your Ramadan is going well. Make the most of it, inshallah. The Prophet ﷺ says that every action of Ibn Adam is for him, إِلَّا الصِّيَامِ فَإِنَّهُ لِي وَأَنَا أَجْزِي بِهِ, except for fasting, because I, Allah Ta'ala, I will grant the believers a very special reward for fasting. So initially there's always a lot of excitement about Ramadan when it first starts, and then in the middle there's a dip, and at the end there's excitement again for the last few nights. But let's strive, inshallah, to have a consistent program and a consistent, I think, most importantly, presence of heart and presence of mind, that our hearts are connected to Allah Ta'ala throughout the day. Even when we are relaxing, our hearts are in conversation with Allah Ta'ala, our hearts are in remembrance with Allah Ta'ala. Even if we're at work, just because we're in our normal environment, it doesn't mean it's normal times. These are special, sacred times, and we have to create that sacred reality within our hearts. So strive always just to be in the remembrance of Allah Ta'ala, and surround yourselves with things that will help you remember Allah Ta'ala during this beautiful, precious, precious month. If we look back on our lives, that the month of Ramadan could very well be our salvation. The month of Ramadan, if you look back at your entire life, it may be that the month of Ramadan is your salvation. Famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ says that there's a gateway in Jannah called Rayyan, and that is for the fasters, and the gateway will call out Aina Sa'imun, where are those that are fasting, and then will only stand those who are the ones who have fasted and truly fasted, and then they will enter into that gate, and then the gate will be locked and no one else shall enter. So it may be that we may fall short in many aspects. It may be that we may fall short in all the other months of the year. But perhaps if we have a good Ramadan, Allah will write us from amongst the Sa'imun, and this may be our salvation. So strive hard in this month to make it a month of Iman and Taqwa, and may Allah accept. Allahu Ameen. Alhamdulillah, we took a few weeks to cover Surah Naba, and I thought we should just continue the beginning of Juz Amma and go to the next surah, which is Surah Naziat. And Surah Naziat is also a Makki surah, and will have many similar themes to Surah Naba because the context is very similar. And we find actually that sometimes that the Makki surahs are actually quite difficult to almost like understand. The Madini surahs they're longer, and there's more explanation in them, whereas the Makki surahs are very concise and the words have many meanings. So you can see, one Nazi'ati gharqa, that's an ayah, and there's no long explanation, so it's actually quite challenging to understand it, and we'll discuss that phenomena today, inshallah ta'ala. So first of all, the word Nazi'at, the word Nashitat, Sabihat, Sabiqat. What do all of those have in common?
Is feminine.
They're all feminine, yes. They're all the feminine plural. What else about the word structure they all have in common?
First 4 ayat have 2 words in each sentence.
Okay, each ayat has 2 words in each sentence, and the first word, those words I mentioned now, Nazi'at, Nashitat, Sabihat, Sabiqat. The qasam, but what about the word structure? I want to know. The what to the what verb I want to know. Nazi'at, nashitat.
Fourth, no, third bar.
That's a good case, brother Isha, but it's
Six
because of the
bab.
mud.
The six bab.
The sixth part also a good guess because of the mud, but it's not the second or the sixth or the third. I'll tell you, give you a clue. Take out the art. نازع ناشط سابح سابق, and put fa'ala into there. So take out the extra.
Third bab?
Okay,
Third bab.
No.
not the third bab.
It's the first bab, Maulana.
First bab.
It's
Fa'il,
Imran,
ismul
mashallah.
fa'il.
It's ismul fa'il of the first bab. Ismul fa'il is the first bab. So if I have the word, for example, nasara, it means he helped. And if I want to say a helper, I say nasirun. If I have kataba, he wrote, and say writer, I say katibun. Sajada means he prostrated, and I say sajidun is a prostrator. So naza'a means someone who pulls something out. So nazi'un is the ismu fa'il. Nashata means someone who's like has activity, who is active. So nashitun is someone who's active. Sabaha is someone who swims. So sabihun is someone who swims or glides. Sabaqa means someone who outstrips or beats. So sabiqun is the one who outstrips. So it's going to be the ismul fa'il of the first bab. What about the word فَالْمُدَبِّرَاتِ أَمْرًا? What mudabbirat? What is the what bab?
Think, the thinkers.
Okay, so but so in terms of the bab, what is the what bab? فَالْمُدَبِّرَات.
Second bab,
Second bab. What is second bab?
ismul fa'il.
Ismul fa'il. You can see Noran's been around a long time. MashaAllah. Dabbara yudabbiru tadbiran mudabbirun. So the fifth verse is also ismul fa'il. So in other words, we have 5 verses that Allah takes an oath by an ismul fa'il. One nazi'at. So ismul fa'il is someone who does the action. Okay. So what I'm going to do with regard to this verse, I'm going to first let's discuss the translation and then we can discuss the meaning. So first of all, one nazi'at, that there is an oath, a waw al qasam. So Allah is taking an oath by one nazi'ati, and Allah is saying gharqa, one nazi'ati. So naza'a, what does naza'a mean? What does naza'a mean?
Is the extract.
To extract, to pull out, to pluck out. Almost like you pull out a plant by its roots. That's naza'a. Like you rip out, you take out completely. What's the meaning of gharqa? Anybody know?
With violence.
Means what? Sorry,
With violence. They say
okay, gharqa. You can
those who
the
extract
translation
with
will
violence.
deal with violence, but what does gharqa actually mean?
Thinking, drowning.
It actually means can refer to drowning as well. So gharqa can actually mean when you immerse something. So a gharik is someone who is drowning actually. So gharqa is when you immerse something. So gharqa can also mean drowning as well, or when you immerse yourself in something. So when we're looking at these two words, Allah says wa by and nazi'at, those who pull or pluck. Gharqa. And gharqa we can consider it to be drowning, or it could be someone who is doing it in a sense when they are immersed in the action. They're using their strength, and they're using they're immersed in the action that they're doing completely. Okay. So who does that refer to? Does the ayah tell me who it's referring to? Yes or no?
explicitly, no?
No.
No. So the ayah doesn't tell me who it's referring to. Because if you think about things that pull and pluck, just without thinking about the ayah, which things pull or pluck? Which things?
Angels.
Angels, what else? Can humans pull?
Yes.
Yes, humans can
Certain
pull. Can a,
things.
can a wind storm and pull something out of the ground?
Yes.
Definitely.
A wind can definitely come and pull something out of the ground. Can a horse come and through his galloping pull something out of the ground?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
definitely.
Animals
So in other
or
words, the ayah doesn't tell, and none of these ayahs tell you what is being referred to. It just tells you the quality of what is being referred to. So Allah is taking an oath by a being, and that being is nazi'at, is plucking, is removing, is pulling, gharqa, drowning, in other words, with a full exertion. In the second one, Allah says, one nashitat. What is, okay, so I should open a dictionary as well. And then I think we can look up some words as well. So look up some words. What's the meaning of nashitat? Nashata. Anybody?
those who remove the souls of the believers.
Okay, but the linguistic meaning of nashata.
Ashita
Wake
is
up.
to be lively, animated, brisk.
Lively, good. Lively, animated, brisk, sprightly. Someone who does things with with activity. The word on the okay, I'm gonna go here to this dictionary as well. The word nashata on the, let me just move this window quickly. Can you see here it's not the first bab, on the fourth bab here, anshata, and also has similar meaning on the first bab as well. It can also mean to loosen something or to untie something, to untie a rope or a cord, like to pull something and it becomes loose. So it's also the meaning of nashata. So it means someone who has activity, who has energy. Also means someone who pulls something and it becomes becomes loosened. Something becomes loosened. So again here, the ayah doesn't specifically tell you who it's referring to. Allah is saying, I take an oath by an-nashitat, beings that have activity, beings that are loosening something and something is exiting. Nashta, and that's going to be um like a maf'ul mutlaq, telling you uh telling you that they are doing it like freely, or they're doing it it's a repeat of the verb basically. So when you have a word that's ambiguous, what do you call it in the Quran? When you have a word that's ambiguous, what do you call that? Anybody know?
Mutashabihat,
Good. Mutashabihat. And when you have a word that's not ambiguous, that is categorical, what do you call that?
mutlaq.
Mutlaq can be it, but there's another word that the Quran uses. Anybody?
ما في باين باينة.
Bayina is another word, but there's another specific word they use in Surah Al Imran, in the first page of Al Imran.
Is it muhkam?
It is muhkam, mashallah, muhkam. Okay. So if I'm going to divide the words of the Quran, I'm going to divide the words in the Quran into muhkam these are actually very, very important concepts, because if you get lost on these concepts, you can really go wrong with translation with the understanding of Quran, and Allah actually speaks about how people go wrong with that understanding. So let's just do this one quickly here. So, oops, muhkam, muhkamun. So the Quran can be some verses, or it's called most of the verses of the Quran is muhkam, and other verses are mutashabi. What are the root of mutashabihat? What are the root letters of it? What does it mean? Mutashabihun just for now.
Would the root letters be tashabba?
Okay. Good try, but not exactly.
I'm missing my mark today, Madana.
Not the ta. The sha and the ba, and what else?
Shubha.
Ha.
Shabaha. Shabaha. What does that mean? What does tashbih mean? Shabbaha. Shabba means when? Anybody know? It means when things resemble each other. Resemble each other. So let's go. So let me just open the ayah for you quickly, and then I'll come back to this page. What page is it on? We're on page 583. Let me just find Ali Imran for you quickly, and then we can. Oops, let's go. Where is that? Ali Imran is going to be in. Okay, so let's first locate the discussion in the Quran, and then I can go to the more technical side of things. Allah Ta'ala says here, Alif Lam Mim, Allah Nazzala Kitabun Hakim. Yeah, Allah says, verse number 7. Allah says, A'udhu Billahi Shaitanir Rajeem, Huwa alladhi, He is the one that Anzala, He has sent alayka upon you, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, al-kitaba, the book. Minhu, from amongst it are ayatun muhkamatun. There's the word muhkam. Ayatun are verses that are muhkam. Muhkam means categorical. Uncle Omar, I'm answering you now, inshallah. Ayatun, they are verses that are muhkam, and muhkam means they are categorical. They only have one meaning. There is an ambiguity in the meaning. Hunna, these muhkam, categorical, clear, unambiguous verses, they are ummul kitab. Means what? Mother of the book. Mother meaning what? The core, the foundation, the heart, the essence of the book, the main component of the book are ayatun muhkamat. Wa ukharu means others. There are other verses that are mutashabihat, and mutashabihat doesn't mean unclear. It's not a good meaning. It means that it has multiple meanings, and there is ambiguity on what the final meaning is. And we're going to discuss more about what that means. Can you all hear me? I think the sound should be fine.
Yes,
We
no.
can-
Okay. فأما الذين في قلوبهم زيغ فأما as for those that have in their hearts زيغ. زيغ means like deviation. They're away from the correct understanding. فيتبعون, they will follow ما تشابه منه. They will follow that which is ambiguous from amongst the Quranic verses. So they won't follow the muhkam, they will follow the mutashabih, the ambiguous verses. ابتغاء الفتنة, seeking trials, وابتغاء تأويله, and seeking their own interpretation. And Allah says, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ, and no one knows its meaning except Allah. وَالرَّاسِخُونَ, there's a lot of discussion here about whether there's a pause here, and وَالرَّاسِخُونَ is the mubtada of the new sentence, or is وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ part of no one knows its meaning except the rasikhuna fil ilm. It's a long discussion. I won't get into it now. Anyway, والراسخون في العلم, those who are firmly grounded in knowledge, يقولون, they say, آمنا به, we believe in it, كل من عند ربنا, all of it is from our Lord. Okay, so the point I want to make is that there are verses that are muhkam and verses which are mutashabi. So verses which are muhkam, let's just say here that they have let's call this a single categorical meaning with no ambiguity. Okay, and then verses which are mutashabi, they are ambiguous, they have multiple possible meanings. Okay, so for example, if I say قل هو الله أحد, is that muhkam or mutashabi? Allahu Ahad.
محكم.
محكم.
That's going to be muhkam. In other words, there's only one understanding that Allah is Ahad, He is one, He is indivisible in every sense. If I say Alif Lam Mim, muhkam mutashabih.
متشابه.
تشابه.
Mutashabih, because we're not actually sure what the meaning is. Some scholars say only Allah knows its meaning. Other scholars have had other opinions for Alif Lam Mim, Yasin, Taha. Many opinions. For example, Yasin. Some people say Yasin is the name of one of the names of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Therefore, we call people Yasin. Some people say Yasin means "O people." So many different opinions. So when you have a muhkam verse, you have, let's call it, you have one meaning, and when you have a mutashabi verse, you have multiple possible meanings. So you're going to have one meaning. So what you have here is you're going to have multiple meanings. Now the question is, how do we come up with multiple meanings? Or let me not say it that way. Let me say, when we have these multiple meanings, right? We have one meaning here, we have another meaning here. Let's say we have four meanings here. How do we sort through what is our preferred meaning or our preferred understanding or what we think it means? So we have four meanings.
Scholar,
Yes. So
understand
how
the
could we do
context
it?
and the Surah.
So just to tell more about that, about what you mean by that.
So if the meaning is ambiguous, I don't know if this is what Mulana was asking, but if the meaning is ambiguous, then you try and make sense of it in the context of when it was revealed in the life of the Prophet.
Okay, so you can say historical context. So let's first take a macro picture. When I have 1, 2, 3, 4, does it mean that the ayah has four meanings or there is four possible meanings? Which one do you think it is?
Possible meaning.
Possible.
Four possible meanings. How can I eliminate from the outset that which is not acceptable?
It goes against the grain of the Quran and fiqh.
Okay, which I could express in a different way. How can I express it with regard to muhkam? Like, for example, if someone says that Nabi Isa is kalimatullah. Nabi Isa is kalimatullah. And Allah's kalima is Allah's word. And Allah's word is uncreated. And therefore Nabi Isa is uncreated, therefore Nabi Isa is God.
The Quran states clearly there is only La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Okay. So can you see someone is taking a Nura Bismillah?
I just think if if it goes against what we've been taught, like what we know, um, then there's just a level of, I think, even if you didn't study Deen to that level, there are certain things which you just know, like it can't possibly mean this.
Okay, but the question, how do you just know it? From a let's call it from a epistemological point of view. In other words, where do you get that source of information from that you just know it?
Your akidah.
Well, I suppose if it contradicts any muhkam, then it can't be a possible meaning.
Okay, good. So that's the answer I was looking for in terms of the specific discussion. So in terms of the specific discussion, is there are many answers to that, but let's say at the primary level, because obviously we can extend to hadith and many other things, but at the primary level, a mutashabi cannot contradict a muhkam, because a muhkam has a single meaning. For example, if the muhkam is Allah is one, that's the muhkam, and you come up with a mutashabi meaning, which is a let's call it a logically a linguistically conceivable option. So, for example, if you linguistically derive from the fact that kalimatullah means Allah's speech, which means the person is uncreated, which means the person is God, you used a linguistic argument, but that argument goes against the muhkam, the clear, unambiguous verse that Allah is one, then you have to eliminate that option. Are you with me? So, in other words, you always have to, first of all, you have to take the mutashabi and you have to always understand the mutashabi in light of the muhkam. So let's just put that there. Put this as notes here. Number one is that each of the possible meanings cannot contradict a muhkam verse. Makes sense? Because that's the job of the muhkam verse. The job of the muhkam verse is what? Hunna ummul kitab. It is the foundation. It is where you base your foundational understanding. So each of the possible, or let's say none of the possible meanings can contradict a muhkam verse. Okay. Next one. How am I going to, how do I get to meanings of words? How do I get to meanings basically? What I'm going to ask is like when Allah says wan nazi'ati, how do I know what wan nazi'ati means?
Out with the root letters.
So we say root letters, basically we're adopting what? We can adopt a
Grammatical.
grammatical, it's called a linguistic approach. So each word can be studied linguistically. Will the linguistic meaning render one possibility or multiple possibilities?
Multiple possibilities.
There might be multiple possibilities, or it could multiple shades of meaning. For example, the word harqa could be drowning. The word harqa could mean someone exerting themselves, immersing themselves into something. So in other words, and this could produce multiple meanings. I'm just writing notes here as I'm having the discussion. I'm not presenting the formal science. I'm just writing notes as I have a discussion with you. Then what else besides linguistics could produce meanings? What else besides linguistics?
Relevance to a certain incident that has taken place, and there is a historical background to it.
Okay, so I could understand historical context. Okay, what else can I look at?
Marna, could the Quran or Islam define certain older words and give it new meanings, like perhaps salah and like we had waqia and so on, gives it specific meanings based on Islamic context?
Okay, but where would I find that specific meanings?
From the hadith, the Prophet might explain it.
Okay, good. So there might be, let's call this narrations. Let's call this prophetic narrations. Prophetic narrations that provide an opinion. Besides prophetic narrations, who else could provide an opinion?
The companions.
Okay, so there may be also, let's just call them early mufassirin. Early mufassirun that transmit opinions. Okay, there's one more missing. Where else can I get the potential meanings?
There may be the same word in another language with a certain meaning.
Okay, but that will be tied to linguistically as well. That will be tied linguistically as well.
And Maulana?
A
Yes.
word could
Reference scholars?
Okay, so that will be with Qadib Mufassirun that transmit different opinions.
Maya, could it be in a different part of the Quran reference?
Say it again.
The Quran explains it.
Okay, I could look somewhere else in the Quran. I could check usage in the Quran. And the last one I'll add, the one I was looking for here also is that the surah context might give me. You see, when I have multiple surah context, so let me just surah context may influence the final choice. Okay, so I mentioned all of these things to show that this is not it's not always very cut and dried. What do I mean by that? A mutashabi word, by its definition, has multiple meanings. If it has only one meaning, it's called muhkam. If it has multiple possible meanings, it's called mutashabi. Tashabah means when things resemble each other. So meaning one resembles two, resembles three. In other words, they could all hold be possibilities. So number one is that none of these words, none of these options, say I produce 4 possible meanings, none of these options should contradict. The reason I mention this is that when Naziat, just to give you background context, when Naziat, a lot of the classical scholars, including Ibn Abbas, says that the first 5 verses refers to angels. However, there are also classical scholars who actually said that the verses refers to winds. Some scholars say the verses refers to stars and planetary bodies. Some scholars say the verses refers to horses. So now you have 4 opinions. Now you have angels, you have winds, you have horses, and you have planetary bodies. I have 4 different possibilities. So number one is none of these must contradict the muhkam verse. So let's assume that none of those 4 contradict the muhkam verse because they're all just about creation. Then what I have to do next is that you study each word linguistically and you see what meaning it produces. But in this case, it can produce any of those meanings because Allah is not specifying who the mawsuf is. Like only the sifa is there, not linguistically, but only the description of the person is there or the being, not the actual name of the being. The being is a plucker or an organizer or a racer, but Allah doesn't mention the actual being. I can look at the historical context. I can think about this being a Makki surah. What was the phenomena in Makkan period? What languages used in Makkan period? What did they refer to? What would be common for them to understand, and so on. I could look for prophetic narrations where did the Prophet ﷺ is a hadith recorded where he said that this refers to angels, or this refers to horses, or this refers to winds. As far as I know, there are no prophetic narrations on these 5 ayat that specify what they refer to. Next, I can check what the early Mufassirun said. What did the early Mufassirun say about this? Ibn Abbas says this refers to angels. I may have other opinions that Hassan al-Basri said it refers to winds, for example. So I might have different opinions which I can look at. I can look at the usage of the Quran. Where else did Allah use naza'a? How did Allah use Naza'a? What context was it used? I can look within the surah context and say, how is this word used within the surah? So if the surah is linked to Qiyamah, what would be the best link towards Qiyamah? Because it's not like let me just say, it's not like a free for all, but the word itself, or the way the ayah is expressed, produces a range of possible meanings, and I need to have a methodology to basically navigate that range and say that this ayah may have a number of possibilities, but my preferred preference is this or this or this. So I'm not giving you now a strict methodology. I'm saying these are the sources that you draw from when you engage with mutashabih ayahs. Is that you engage with all of these sources. You look for prophetic narrations. If there was a prophetic narration, it will basically almost solve the debate, because the Prophet ﷺ has given an answer, and therefore I don't have to discuss it further, and one day it means something else, because the Prophet ﷺ has the answer. When there are early narrations from early mufassirun, if they all agree, that solves the debate. But if they differ between themselves, that shows you that there is room for engagement and room for possible meanings on this ayah. So does that make sense? Any questions about the approach?
I have a more general question, if I may ask, please.
Mm-hmm.
How do we understand these mutashabihat verses in the context of being told that the Quran is bayina, is clear? Now, I'm not suggesting that there's ambiguity in that, but what I'm suggesting is, if the Quran itself says that it's clear, and then acknowledges that there's mutashabihat verses, I just want to try and get an understanding of that.
Okay, when the Quran says it's clear, it means that within the Quran there's no let's call it, there's no doubt about its overall message and the truth it contains and the truth it expresses. In other words, the Quran would never ever contradict itself, for example, because when two verses contradict, that produces a lack of clarity. So the diversity of meaning with regard to a specific word doesn't affect the notion of clarity of the Quran. For example, let me give you some examples. Is that maybe we have a long Surah Baqarah, and then there's one verse that starts with Alif Lam Mim, which is a meaning which no one really knows the answer for. But the rest of Surah Baqarah, the guidance is completely clear. There's no grayness in the message of the surah, if that makes sense. It's bayin. The message of the surah and the message of the Quran is bayin. And these mutashabih don't affect that clarity.
Okay, shukran. That makes a bit more sense. Shukran.
Okay. Any other questions? Why would Allah put in verses that have ambiguity in it? Why would Allah put in Alif Lam Mim? When most tafsir will say no one knows its meaning except Allah Ta'ala. Why would Allah put in one Naziat when it could be like 4 different things? So Taira, bismillah.
So he wants us to reflect.
Okay, good. Sister Nuran?
I think to draw the attention of the people.
Okay,
They
good.
were not interested in listening to Quran, so curiosity. They'd almost like be forced to want to listen a little bit more, just to make out what's happening before they plug the ears.
Yes. Okay, good. So to draw the curiosity of the people, what is this Alif, Lam, and Mim? What is this Naziat Allah is speaking about? It's like, what's Allah referring to? So it like piques your interest. And as Sister Taira said also, it might make you reflect. What would the challenge be if everything in the Quran was very easy to understand?
I think it also might show that it's divine and it's not created by man.
Okay, so it would be therefore a sense of humility, Allah to show us that that this is not a man-made book, and I will give you things in here that you can't figure out, and you will grapple with for 1,000 years, and you won't have a categorical answer. So what would the issue be if Allah to give us a book where everything is very simple, you read it once and then you understand everything completely?
It would be hard to ponder the verses like for a long time. We could go over a surah every year and we'd probably always find something new.
Okay, good. So in other words, if something is, let's call it, if something is like mentally too easy to overcome, it almost like you feel like you've conquered that thing, or not conquered the thing, but you feel like you've exhausted its meaning and you've exhausted its possibility, and like almost like mentally you've overcome it. But with regard to the Quran now, you mentally are always on the back foot, because you're mentally always like, okay, I'm not too sure here. So it puts you in that very kind of active state. Fadiyaqeen?
Could also mean that if you've read it and understood it, you may not want to read it again.
Yes, good. So if you answered it once, you'll be like, why must I read this again? I got the whole thing the first time. And so the whole nature of the Quran is that the nature of the Quran, yes, it is clear and it's accessible to all people, but there are, let's call it, there are levels within the Quran. And when I think it was Ibn Abbas who mentioned that there's a level of the Quran that anybody who knows Arabic can access. That's like the normal Arab who can read it, can access. There's a level of the Quran that only those that are ulama that study the Quran can access. There's a level that only the prophets understand, and there's a level that only Allah understands. So in a sense, there must be difficulty and a challenge in understanding the Quran, because that's what makes us keep thinking and pondering and debating and saying this is a strong opinion, this is a stronger opinion, because that keeps us engaged with the Quran, and that sense of mystery about the Quran. The Quran actually is not an easy book to read. It doesn't read like a normal book. It reads very, very differently. So mutashabihat is part of that fabric of the Quran, which keeps us engaged. Naziat?
Sorry, Maulana. I just makes me want to think of Maulana Mu'adh always ends with Allah knows best, because I mean it sort of reinforces that idea. Possibly, you can debate about it, but at the end, Allah only knows best, as is mentioned, I think, in that Ali Imran verse.
Yes. So that's going to be the approach. The challenge is that, as Allah mentioned, is that once you attach, because the Quran is really the battleground of ideas. The Quran is the battleground of ideas, meaning what? That every group in Islam, across the Islamic spectrum of views and movements, historical, modern, every group in Islam seeks legitimacy within the Quran. They seek to find their identity and their views reflected within the Quran, because that gives the group, it makes them legitimate, it makes them authentic, it makes them true, because now they're attaching their ideological views to a Quranic expression. And therefore this approach to mutashabihat is important, because if you don't have a kind of a formatted approach, then you will, and Allah mentioned there are some people who attach their heart only to the mutashabihat, and they completely forgo the muhkam verses. So people will start making all sorts of arguments on the mutashabihat and completely ignoring what the muhkam verses apply. If we go beyond the muhkam verses, also obviously, which we would subscribe to, is the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the general teaching of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not on a specific verse, but his general body of hadith and teachings, and that body of hadith and teachings will then give you a further reference point in terms of which to understand the mutashabihin. If you take that reference point away, which many of the modernist movements do, then they try to take that reference point away, so there's more freedom to interpret the mutashabih as they please. So the mutashabih exists, but it exists within a specific interpretive context. Brother Abbas, bismillah.
Shukran for that. So does mutashabi verses also change? Let's say if we talk about the birth or the child developing in the womb of the mother. So previously, before science, we didn't know what that meant. And obviously, as man's knowledge increases, then verses become clear and make sense from a scientific perspective. So there's obviously verses still in the Quran that we maybe don't understand now, which will, in a few hundred years, will then make sense. So does that mean it changes as well?
Yes, so definitely our awareness of the scientific phenomena profoundly influences many of the Quran that alludes to scientific phenomena. So it's obviously the verse doesn't change, but let's call it the general understanding of the verse can change and will change over time. Whether it's with embryology or whether it's with cosmology, many of those things, the understanding will change. And often, if you read an old tafsir, they will apply the science of that era to the tafsir because they're trying to understand the verse within their scientific context. And when you fast forward to our time, you can sometimes see that that tafsir is not actually that portion is dated in terms of scientific knowledge, and now we will change it with regard to our time. The whole idea when it comes to uh, it's probably I don't know if it's controversial to say this, but whether like corona is like an infectious disease. I don't know. I want to get into corona debates. I'm fasting as Ramadan. I don't want to get into corona debates, but I'm just saying that the idea that you have an infectious disease, that understanding changes with science. Yes, we have a hadith on infectious diseases, but our understanding of those hadith changes with science. 200 years ago, people didn't wash their hands before they operated. They didn't know about bacteria being passed and so on. So yes, the Quran is there for all times, but our understanding of the Quran will differ from era to era and generation to generation. It's not to say that our understanding now is better than that understanding. Our understanding perhaps on specific limited scientific phenomena might be better, but not our understanding of the overall Quran. There's definitely a degeneration with regard to that kind of rigorous scholarship of the Quran, because very few people have that full understanding of the Arabic and the historical tradition and the entire Islamic legacy to be able to process the understanding of the Quran. I'm only speaking about specific scientific phenomena. Any other questions or comments on this?
Sheikh, thank you very much for a very interesting discussion. I would just like to point out that these differences, especially the mutashabihah, sometimes become such issues of argument and they quarrelsome and they create serious and increase the divides among different groups within the Muslim world. And one has to be very careful how to limit this kind of discussion and keep it to the minimum as well as one can.
Yeah, it's as if our good doctor is quoting the verse where Allah says, فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ زَيْغٌ. As for those who in their hearts they have deviation, فَيَتَّبِعُونَ مَا تَشَابَهَ مِنْهُ ابْتِغَاءَ الْفِتْنَةِ. And that's what Doctor is speaking about there, that people will attach themselves to mutashabi ayahs, sometimes just because they're nafs or whatever misunderstanding they have. And the reason will be ibtigha al-fitnati is maf'ul ajli, is that they are seeking to create discord amongst Muslims. So a very simple solution to Islamic ikhtilaf is a very, very simple understanding. Now, I wish that all our groups had the same maturity. And the simple understanding is that we all agree on the muhkamat. We all agree, and that's the Ummul Kitab, and we all agree on the foundational teachings of Islam. We all begin one. Our Tawheed is the same. Our understanding of the afterlife is the same. Our fundamental understanding of Ibadah is the same. We all agree on the Muhkamat. There are a few mutashabi issues where scholars will naturally differ, because that's the nature of mutashabis, is the difference of opinion, but it doesn't mean that's to divide us. But people, as Dr. said, is people attach the whole movement to a mutashabi ayah, and then that will become like the be all and end all. And Muslims, Muslims agree on a huge amount of things. The stuff we disagree with is like is minimal. Must I sight the moon with my eye or telescope or use the calendar? That's like a very secondary issue that doesn't warrant any division of a people. So I think that, and I maybe end with this, is that ikhtilaf, ikhtilaf, which means differing of opinion, should not lead to iftiraq. And iftiraq means people splitting up in groups. Ikhtilaf is there, yes, but it must not lead to iftiraq. And iftiraq means people becoming firqas, fariq and fariq, people becoming different groups. Why? Because we're all on the same muhkam. And inshallah, our hope is that the Mizan students adopt that Mizan, that balanced approach, where yes, we have fundamental understandings that are the same, foundational understandings that are the same, and there will be ikhtilaf on some mutashabi ayahs, because ikhtilaf can only exist on mutashabi. Show me an Islamic group that doesn't believe Allah is one. It doesn't exist. Show me an Islamic group that doesn't believe we must pray. Show me an Islamic group that doesn't accept Nabi Musa. Show me an Islamic group that doesn't accept Jannah and Jahannam. Show me an Islamic group that thinks pride is good. You know, it doesn't exist because they're all muhkam issues. So the only difference is on the mutashabi. And so why do we make such a big iftiraq on the mutashabi? We shouldn't do that. Okay, so I wanted to just, before I get into the surah, I wanted to just lay out some of that kind of understanding. Any last questions or comments before I close? Okay, so I think we are all covered, inshallah. And then next week, if you can start preparing that surah, the first 10 verses or so, start preparing, look up the words. You can look in a few tafsir and see what you find there as well. And then we will discuss and also think about the themes as well, the themes of the surah, and we will continue it next week, inshallah. Have a blessed Ramadan. Exert yourself this Ramadan. And please remember ourselves and all your fellow students in our dua, in your du'as, inshallah ta'ala. May Allah bless and protect. And wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.